I want to lift a passage, a part of a verse out of Genesis chapter 31 and verse number 12. I only want to read the last part of that verse. And I'm going to read it out of the New Living Translation. The last part of that verse says, "For I have seen how Laban has treated you." Again, that's Genesis 31:12, the last clause in that verse. "For I have seen how Laban has treated you." I want to talk about being blessed in spite of. Being blessed in spite of. One of the reasons why I try to get people to read their Bibles is because it answers today's questions. The print of antiquity has answers to modern day, everyday, today's questions. And if you are a consistent Bible reader, you can be praying about something. And if you read your Bible, almost inevitably, you're going to read something that relates to what you're praying about. The answers to today's questions are in the Bible. Read it and you'll get it. This being Dr. King's week of celebration, celebrating his birthday and all of the events that have taken place relative to that, I have really been praying regarding the situations that African American people face today in this country, not just African American people, but particularly African American people. And then today, as I got from my knees praying regarding the situation, we are assigned to read Genesis 30 and 31. And as I picked up my Bible to read, and I'm reading this story about Jacob and his relationship with Laban. And it's almost like the questions are answered right there in my face. Because when we, as African Americans, read this particular verse or this particular chapter, chapters 30 and 31, we're going to see how labor in a system that resists our progress, that's happening here in Genesis 30 and 31. We are people that face the changing of rules, even as we are doing the work. It's right there in Genesis 30 and 31. And sometimes we, like Jacob, are being told to wait while inequity persists. Is right here in these two verses, these two chapters. Let me explain it, because it may be that as you read it, it's difficult to understand. Because Genesis 30 and 31 tells one continuous story. Chapter 30 shows how Laban and what Laban did to Jacob. Chapter 31 reveals what God was doing for Jacob, often quietly, often strategically, and behind the scenes. In 30, we're going to see how Laban is going to mistreat Jacob. But in 31, we're going to see how God was working on Jacob's behalf, even in the midst of what Laban was doing. After Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob asked Laban if he could return home. But Laban urges him to stay, and he tells him, "Jacob, my whole household has been blessed since you've been here, so I don't want you to leave." But they negotiate, and then finally, Laban agrees to let Jacob go, let him leave. And they agree on a pay system. Because Laban saying, I need to pay you something for what you've done. So Jacob agrees, and Jacob says, what I'll do, I will take all of the speckled and spotted animals that are in your flock, and you can have all the rest of them. My pay will be the speckled and spotted animals, because those were the least desirable. Jacob is trying to be kind, and Laban agrees. But then, after Laban agrees with the deal, Laban goes into his flock, removes most of the animals that are speckled and spotted, so that Jacob would not have any. He rigs the system. He changes the rules. He stacks the odds. He says, when Jacob comes to get his animals, he won't find any because I've already removed all the speckled and spotted ones. So Jacob continues to work. And what Jacob does is he peels a rod, places a rod in the water, and when the animals come down, they had this belief that when animals come down and drink water, if they are looking at a peeled rod in the water, that the offspring, because the animals would mate at the spring, and if they made it while there is a peeled rod in the water, they believed that the animals would be born speckled and spotted. So Jacob puts a rod in the water. It was not a true belief. It was not, it was somewhat superstitious, but they believed it. And so Jacob puts the rod in the water. The animals began to mate. But we want to know for sure that the animals did not become speckled and spotted because they were looking at a rod in the water. And you'll see that as you read chapter 31. So Genesis 30 kind of ends with this quiet but powerful line that God says, this man has increased exceedingly. So Jacob's flock grows, and it grows exponentially. It grows rapidly. And Laban cannot figure out how is it that Jacob is increasing, even though he has removed all the speckled and spotted animals. It's not fair the way Laban has done it. He renders no apology for what he has done, but God blesses Jacob anyway. And I think that's where we need to hang our hat. God blesses Jacob anyway. And when you start reading Genesis 31, it explains how this all happened. Because God comes and he speaks to Jacob, speaks to him in a dream, and reveals to Jacob what he could not see while he was working. God says to Jacob, I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am God of Bethel. So God shows Jacob that it was God who caused the speckled and spotted animals to multiply. While Laban was scheming, God was intervening. While Jacob thought he was surviving by his own effort of peeling the rods and putting them in the water, God was ensuring this had really nothing to do with you, Jacob. I am the one who made sure that the offspring of the animals were speckled and spotted. I'm the one that went around Laban's manipulative, evil, and mean system to bless you in spite of. Then God does something even more important. He tells Jacob to leave. All right, you've got your speckled, you've got your spotted animals, leave. Sometimes God doesn't just bless us within a broken system, he tells us a way out of it. So Jacob leaves secretly. When Laban sees that Jacob is gone, Laban pursues him. But God steps in again. It's amazing. God steps in while Laban is pursuing Jacob, and he appears to Laban in a dream, warns him, do not harm Jacob. God comes to Laban and says, do not put your hands on Jacob. Don't harm him. That same system that had exploited Jacob is suddenly restrained by God himself. When you read this story, what you will hopefully come away with is the fact that even though the system is rigged, even though there are things that are against us and against you, please know that God works in the background, behind the scenes. Some things that we might think are happening because we are working so hard and being so diligent. Oh no, God is working on our behalf. He's a God of favor, and he does it in spite of. He sees what others manipulate. He knows what the system tries to conceal. He blesses us without permission. He doesn't have to get anybody to allow him to bless us. He will bless us anyway because he's just that kind of God. And I love him. I thank him for the fact that we are blessed in spite of.